Hello, my name is Dr. Ashok Malhotra. I'm the chair of the Yoga Society at SUNY Oneonta. This Yoga Society is funded by a grant from Meta-Nexus Foundation of Philadelphia, as well as by the SUNY College at Oneonta. Today we are very lucky to have with us Dr. James Austin, who is a medical doctor who had practiced neurology for more than 40 years, as well as he has been a Zen practitioner for more than 30 years. And this is a rare kind of combination. Even though more people are doing research, more people are coming up with the paradigm so that there can be an interface between science and religion. And he's the best man to talk to us about his experiences in both of these fields and how he's able to internalize and live with this so-called twins, which will never meet, but they have met with him. And I'm very happy to have Dr. James Austin here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Dr. Schrader is with us. He's a distinguished teaching professor at SUNY Oneonta. He's also the chair of the philosophy department. And between three of us, we are going to unravel, hopefully, the mystery of Zen and the brain.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's first start with this interface between science and religion, which the Meta-Nexus Institute has been encouraging. And that's why we set up this yoga society. And in your own life, you have been able to bring this interface between science and religion through Zen and the brain by studying consciousness as it is understood by medical science, as well as that is understood by Zen. So let's start with it and tell us something about it, educate us.
Wow. Starting at the beginning, at my own entree into this area.
Sure.
Well, I started on a sabbatical in Kyoto, Japan, where I was working in the Department of Pharmacology. And I went to Japan with no particular interest in meditation or in Buddhism. But I heard about an English-speaking Zen master at a nearby temple. And I wanted to learn something more about Zen, about which I knew nothing. So I obtained an interview with him, and then a second interview with him, and then finally a third interview with him, at which point he started showing me, literally by sitting down on the floor, the correct posture for Zen meditation.
And that was after the third
That was after the third interview.
Okay.
Apparently I had to convince him that I was serious. And had I not convinced him that I was a serious learner, I doubt that I would be here today.
Mm-hmm. So
But something about our conversations convinced him that I wanted really to learn more about Zen meditation, and so he instructed me.
So he started instructing you during the third interview.
Yes.
Suppose it was a Japanese from Japan
Yes.
who came to learn about, like you came to learn. Do you think that he would have given a different kind of treatment? He might have used different set of rules for training a Japanese or accepting a Japanese?
Certainly in the old days, the custom was for a Japanese would-be monk to wait outside the temple gates and not be able to enter the temple until maybe nightfall, at which time he would be allowed through the gates only to sort of bunk there that night and would be ushered out the next day, and only after sincerely demonstrating his interest would he be allowed in. So I think maybe I got the easy treatment because I was a Westerner.
Yeah.
Sincerity of interest is a theme that's not uncommon to the West either. I have a nephew of sorts who's currently applying to medical schools.
Really?
And he is finding that the interview process
Oh, yes.
seems to be as much focused on his sincerity and his wanting to practice medicine for humanitarian purposes rather than fiscal gain and things of that sort. Would you speak generally to the importance of commitment to an area of study, whether it's Western medicine or Zen Buddhism or whatever, to our success in that area?
I think it's fundamental. If you're faint-hearted, you might as well not apply. If you're easily discouraged, you won't make it. And true, the interviewer tries to figure out whether this guy or this girl is good for the long haul. And often the questions that you'll be asked will sort of catch you off balance and reveal whether or not you're really are interested in the almighty dollar, or whether you're interested in being of service for other reasons.
So you described yourself earlier as visiting the Zen temple and talking with the master because you didn't know much about Zen,
I didn't
and you
know
wanted
much.
to learn more. But
I did.
But clearly he was looking, fishing, if you wish, for something a little deeper in terms of a spiritual need, a commitment, something of that sort, perhaps.
Well, and I think he was as curious as I was. Who is this neurologist from the States, and what does it mean to be committed to knowing more about the brain? So I sensed there was sort of a mutual interest on both sides, and I was also very interested in his abilities as a potter, which I found out maybe in the second interview. He had done his own pottery. And at that moment I was taking a course in pottery at night downtown in Kyoto, and I think he was interested in what is this guy doing in Kyoto learning Japanese pottery. And I was very interested in some of the pots that I had seen in a little niche there that he had done, Japanese style. So there was, I think, a mutual attraction.
Okay. Now, so after the third interview, you were accepted and you started learning the Zen style of meditation. Now, did you disclose this to your own colleagues in the medical profession that you're going there?
No.
And did they, no?
Well, but I had no colleagues in the medical profession in Tokyo, or in Kyoto, because I was there in a department of pharmacology on sabbatical. But no, I didn't tell my friends back in the States who were card-carrying orthodox neurologists that I was embarking on a Zen because, of course, why would anybody who was already a neurologist be interested in anything as esoteric as Zen Buddhism?
So you're breaking the barriers. And when did you actually disclose to some of your colleagues in the medical sciences? Were you afraid of disclosing it to them?
I was cautiously, because after all, this is a little off the wall to be going into a style of Buddhist meditations and Zen, you know.
Right.
And just the word Buddhism, where else in our Western language do you find two DDs and an H next to each other? This is
a good way to put it.
This is pretty strange, you know. So, but then when the book came out,
Zen and the Brain.
Then the secret was out.
Okay.
So, and by then, of course, I was retired. And as you know, when you're retired, why, you can get away with anything. By then you've got gray hair, and tenure is no longer an issue. You've already got tenure, and
so what is it that you actually give us a kind of major points you make in Zen and the Brain? Because it's like two issues. Some people may call it category kind of mistake you're making by bringing Zen and its view of consciousness, and then talking about brain, the medical view of consciousness. How could they be brought together? Because many people are very skeptical about that kind of interaction. So tell us first the basic points in that book. You know, what is it that you're trying to accomplish?
In a nutshell.
Yes, in a
I see.
nutshell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would say the first two parts of the book begin with that very question: is there any room for discussing Zen Buddhism in the context of neuroscience?
Yes.
I think there is. I think Zen Buddhism helps illuminate some of the frontier issues in neuroscience, what different parts of the brain are doing functionally, how they operate. And I think neuroscience can exist to help Zen students understand the experiences that they're undergoing, both when they meditate and when they're off the cushion out in regular life, in their daily life practice of living. And finally, I think there are experiences that occur on the Zen path, including the experience of sudden enlightenment experiences, that not too many people in Buddhism understand, and very few people in neuroscience appreciate, are important clues as to how the brain does function physiologically. So, Zen and the brain really condenses the fact that both of these disciplines, and they're both disciplines, neuroscience and meditation, they can each illuminate the other.
So they complement each other.
They complement
Or
and
they can
illuminate and
illuminate
each other, yes.
Yeah.
Could we impose on you for one example in each direction? What is it in Zen Buddhism that neuroscience helps illuminate? What is it in our understanding of the brain that Zen practice helps illuminate?
Well, let's talk about the simple matter of whether you keep your eyes open or closed when you meditate.
Okay.
It turns out that the Zen approach through the years, the ages really, has always cautioned, don't let your eyes close all the way, but keep your lids half down or half open. And one of the early Zen teachers, Bodhidharma, who is brought in legendary form, he brought Buddhism from India into China. Bodhidharma was said to have had difficulty meditating for hours and hours on end, and so he was said in legend to have plucked his lids out and thrown them on the ground, at which point tea leaves and tea bushes came from the soil where his eyelids had come. And the point really is that if you close your eyes, you're shutting down an important source of light energy that comes into your eyes and your visual cortex and helps keep you awake while you're meditating. Whereas if your eyes are closed, your lids are down, it's easier to fall asleep while you're meditating, and you might as well be taking a nap lying down someplace. Meditation, in other words, Zen meditation, is staying awake and aware of everything that's going on, and an attempt really to sharpen your awareness of what's going on at the present moment. There are people whom we all know about now who have problems with depression during the winter months, more so, I imagine, in northern New York State.
Sure, sure.
And they
Sure.
suffer from something called SAD, or a kind of depression that's related to the dropping out of light from the sun. Seasonal affective disorder or depression. And these people, from a very practical standpoint, are advised not to meditate with their eyes closed because they have a greater liability to become depressed anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they really, I think, should benefit from the Zen meditative approach of keeping the eyes half open and increasing the amount of light that will come into their brain. So this is one way, I think, that the neuroscience part of knowing more about depression, knowing more about light energies, can relate to the practical ways that people meditate. Going in the other direction, I would say that like many religions, but not all, the Zen Buddhist approach is oriented toward the egocentric self and letting it drop off so that one is open to a more open view of other people,
Right.
the outside world, and is less preoccupied with self-oriented, preoccupied concerns.
Right.
And recently, neuroscience has been looking at the issue of where is it that we represent in our brains all of these self-oriented notions and concepts and constructs of who we are and how proud we are of ourselves. And neuroscientists are finding that some of these representations arise in the areas around the inside of the brain, the medial parts between the two hemispheres, extending all the way from back here along the areas next to the midline and all the way up into the cingulate and the inferior frontal regions here. So you might say, in a simplistic way, that our brain functions that tend to be egocentric and to make us think that we are the kings of the environment are all sort of in the interior portions of our brain. And one of the most striking things about the moment, the episodes in life when one has a peak experience is the way that the self completely drops out of consciousness at that moment. And the person who is in the center of this experience loses entirely the notion of being a separate I. And the issue is, okay, what does it mean in terms of neuroscience to be in a peak experience, at which point you're not in coma, but every past notion that you have of being a separate self, an egocentric self, is completely out of consciousness. Consciousness, in other words, is expanded in many respects, but it's devoid of the idea of self. How does that come about? The question we're asking in the book, Zen in the Brain, is, could it be that some of these midline areas and their connections with parts in the brain that are even deeper, the thalamus, say, could they be at that moment inhibited, and yet other areas in the brain be selectively active? So how do you account for a brain that seems to be totally awake and receptive to the outside world at the same instant that all of its dearly beloved notions of self-identity have dropped out of the picture? And I think that neuroscience can help Zen understand that, and Zen can help neuroscience say, hey, here is a practical instance in normal human beings when in the center of a peak experience,
Right.
a peak experience described in all of the religions of the world.
Yeah, we call it enlightenment, or
Enlightenment,
illumination,
awakening.
awakening, yes.
In every religion there are these peak moments of startling flashes of deep insight, wisdom into the understanding of things as they really are. Buddhism and all religions can say to neuroscience, hey, here's a subject of tremendous importance.
Yes.
Study it. Find out what's going on. It's nothing basically that is non-religious. It is the core, really, of most religious experiences.
So, are there some Zen masters who are, so highly developed in their practice that they're maybe very close to having this peak kind of experience, which they call satori or enlightenment? Are they willing to offer themselves as subjects so that scientists and neurologists can study when they go through this peak experience? Are there some studies which are done on this by the neurologists?
Well, back maybe 3-4 decades ago, a neurologist, electroencephalographer by the name of Professor Hirai,
Yes.
started to do this in Kyoto and studied just basic meditation.
During the
Not
60s.
not these peak moments, but
Right.
just studied meditation.
Yeah.
And found, bottom line, that there was a tendency for the brain waves to shift more from the alpha frequencies of 8 to 12 per second down toward the theta range of 7, say, to 10 or 11 cycles per second.
Mm-hmm.
And found that the theta rhythms tend to occur more in the midline and in the front and move back. And this was in the more accomplished Zen monks who were meditating.
Right.
And the more proficient they were as meditators, and the farther they were along in their monastic training, the greater tendency they had to develop theta rhythms while they were meditating. But the question you asked is, are certain Zen masters in a kind of an ongoing peak experience all the time? No, this has not been studied, but more recently there have been some studies of some very proficient Tibetan meditators.
Okay.
And I'd say one of the interesting findings is that if they have been practicing a certain kind of meditation with compassion for many years, they tend to have more gamma brainwave activity. These are very fast waves, 40 per second, say. Mm-hmm. They tend to have more of these in the left frontal region and less alpha in the left frontal region. So that after long practice at certain kinds of meditation in the direction of compassion and mindful attention,
Right.
It is possible, apparently, to hone the tendencies that everybody has in the direction of a more compassionate approach to life.
Let me ask you, we have just a few more minutes left. You were describing to me, earlier that when you're going through your Zen meditation practice, and you still had the concept of your ego, yourself, and so forth, the ordinary self, which is working here.
Did you say ordinary
Ordinary.
or ornery?
No, that too, both of them. Ordinary
Yes.
self.
Okay.
And you said that during your Zen practice, you have to ask for somebody as part of the monastery to come and hit you on your back with this kind of flat stick. And that helped you to some other be stunned. And that way you were able to become aware of yourself, and at the same time you're able to get rid of the self. So we have a few minutes, so see if you can tell us something about it.
Well, one of the traditional ways to help a meditator stay awake in formal Zen meditation in monasteries is to have the monk who sort of walks around carrying the stick, and it's a flat stick, deliver a slap to the shoulder blade high up here of a monk who is drowsing off, who is tending to fall asleep. And later on, not in Kyoto, but at other places, a meditator who feels about to drop off or who feels sluggish can request by folding the palms together and bowing to that patrolling monk, can request a slap on the shoulder.
So what will that do for the person?
And that will, well, you know,
one is to wake the person up.
It'll do two things.
Yes.
Number one, it will help you wake up because it's a loud noise.
Maybe I had to do that for my students.
Well, that's another issue. That's another issue.
I don't think they permit us to do that here.
That's another issue. This, you know, is a voluntary request on the part of the meditator.
Right.
So, and the second thing it does is to help overcome the notion that we all have that we are a privileged body and nobody should touch us, let alone slap us with a stick. I mean, this is a foreign kind of concept. So you're opening yourself up to a sort of a dissolution of all that privileged self-image that you have, and you're allowing somebody to come up and hit you with a stick. And this is one important step in the dissolution of the egocentric self-image.
So that's what they mean by the experience of no mind.
No mind is a desired state which you get into during meditation in which you're dropping out your thoughts, but you're keeping your awareness very intact. So you don't have this monkey mind that's jumping around
from place to place.
from thought to thought, but your thoughts are just out, and your awareness is tuned up. That's no mind or no thought.
That's no mind.
And we go back to this notion of self that you were talking about before, that drops out.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate, and I thank you again for coming to our wonderful town, Oneonta.
I wouldn't miss
and
it, especially in the spring.
yes,
Much better in the spring.
yeah. Thank you very much.